Ay ay da dee da dee da da. Dee da ding da dee din dee din dee dee dee. Ay da dee da dee da da. Dee din dee 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 din dee 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 dee. Ha dee da da. Okay, good morning, everybody. We're back with the laws of Pas Akum, Bishul Akum, Bishul Yisrael, all those interesting halachot. We're in chapter 38 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and we are in, depending on your pagination of your book, we're in paragraph 7. And yesterday we just, in our last class, we discussed some of the leniencies if we gave the example of an applesauce cooked by a person who isn't Jewish, and can we eat that? And it seemed to say, since this is not an item which is oiled shulchan melech, this is not something which is fancy. It's not going to be served at a fancy meal, and we know it's just apples, and we know that stam keli meina ben yoma. We know that generally, unless it's a restaurant, just somebody's personal utensils are generally not used 24 hours, so that was going to be permitted. So now we're going to get to another thing. This is very, very much an issue which comes up in Jewish households, more prevalent than some of the other things in this chapter. You have a non-Jewish housekeeper or cook or a maid, somebody who works. Maybe they're a caregiver. Maybe they're right for an elderly person, or maybe they're a nanny for children, right? So it's any kind of ozeret bayit, we say in Hebrew, right? Anybody who's helping out in the house who's not Jewish. Amavashelas Bishul Yisrael, but they're going to cook some food for the Jewish resident of the home. Nohagim lahakel mipnei she'efshar shelo yechateh echad mibei habayis be'esh. So he is going to say, we're going to be lenient. A little bit more light on the subject. We're going to be lenient, and we're going to say that it's impossible that some member of the household didn't stoke the fire. Now, today, most people don't cook over fire, right? We're cooking over, we've got gas stoves or electric stoves, and so forth. So is this going to still apply? So the answer is b'diavad. If they cook something, we're going to say we have what to depend on. L'chadchila, we're customary to just make sure that if anything's going to be cooked, we turn it on. We turn on the burner. But what if you got a little kid, or you've got an elderly person? You can ask them to go, hey, you go turn on the stove, you 6-month-old, baby, right? That's not going to work. Or, Mrs. Goldstein, who Nebuch, she's very, very elderly, and she's, confined to a bed, and there's a non-Jewish person who's taking care of her. Well, we can't have them. So then we're going to be, we can't make the person starve. So if we can't find any other way, we're, because this person is elderly or this is a kid, so we have other circumstances. So we're going to be lenient here. Okay, number 8. Let's say she's cooking for herself or himself. But if they're cooking for themselves, then again, in the case where there's a house of people who are capable of cooking for themselves, but they're going to make something for themselves, but they're going to make something for themselves, then other people are probably not going to get involved in that. Literally, the words are, the efshar delo mahani bazev chidu, that somebody else in the house is not going to come and stoke the coals. Degara mi'ilam avshel Bishul Yisrael. And it's possible that even stoking would be of no avail, for this would be worse if she were cooking for a non-Jew. Lo levad hatafshel asur, ele gama kaderin esur. The evidence says she has chacham. Okay, so now this is a little bit more complex. So we got a case where she's cooking for herself or himself, and so he says it's a case where it could be worse. Well, so first of all, if the person cooked, so we're going to say if she cooked food which is subject to the rules in a general situation of food cooked for by a non-Jew, what are we talking about? That oile shulchan melech, right? They're cooking, let's say, a hamburger. So then we've got an issue with the food, and we have an issue with the utensil as well. And it says you should ask a competent rabbi should be asked. So one of the things here is that, as you see, is that there are a lot of issues that can come up when you have a non-Jewish person helping with the cooking. And it's always best to have some kind of Jewish supervision or involvement there, because you can avoid these kind of situations. But generally speaking, if you have a non-Jewish help in the home, they ideally should not be cooking anything for themselves. And that does make things easier. But again, you can't prevent them from cooking for themselves, especially in the case where, let's say, they're live-in help. So then you come up with certain parameters so that it works out best. And again, these are broad strokes here, because we can't get into every single possible scenario. But the most important part, I would say, the takeaway from number 8 is that there is a difference if they're cooking for other people or for herself, and that there could even be an issue in theory with the vessels that they're cooking with. 9. Now this is what I hinted at right there. Food cooked by a non-Jewish person on Shabbos for a Jew who is sick. Okay. Hatachi Asab Shabbos says that the food is shouldn't even be eaten after Shabbos. Even for the sick person. If you could give them something else, okay. So generally speaking, when a Jewish person asks a non-Jew to do work for them on Shabbos, that we're not allowed to benefit from that work. So if you were to ask a non-Jewish person to cook for you some food on Shabbos, that food would be forbidden because you've asked them to do something forbidden. But we have a case here of a sick person, or we're going to talk about a person who needs this food, and the food was cooked in a permitted to cook for this person who needed that food, and so the person can eat it. But what about after Shabbos? Are they still allowed to eat? So we're going to say that food should not be eaten after Shabbos, even by the sick person, because it was only made to be eaten on Shabbos. If other food is available, if there's no other food available, you can have that food. Utensils, we're going to wait as well, because he says that something was forbidden to do, right? We had permission to do it, but it was a forbidden act. So he wants us to wait. Shulchan Aruch wants us to wait 24 hours. Beitza, eggs. You could eat an egg raw. Certainly, Rocky Balboa. Nonetheless, but this is only done in unusual circumstances. So they want to say that if a non-Jew cooked, even though eggs themselves are not oile shulchan melech, you're not going to put eggs on a fancy table. So then the food is going to be forbidden. The eggs are going to be forbidden. And he says this applies to other kinds of food. Now, what if you got a case where they're cooking a lot of eggs, let's say hard-boiled eggs, for Jews and for non-Jews? And this issue comes up. Sometimes you go to you're at a conference or at some kind of place, and they have a free breakfast, and you want to know, can you eat those hard-boiled eggs or not? So when you've got one of these commercial kitchens, so maybe there would be room to be lenient because they're cooking lots of eggs together. But then we have the problem of stam kelim ein ben yomo, that vessels, which are just regular vessels, we assume haven't been used in 24 hours, but that doesn't apply in the case of a restaurant or a commercial kitchen. But you don't have any other food to eat, let's say. So, that case requires a little bit more extrapolation, but we do want to say that in general, even eggs, which are not a fancy dish, we're going to want to make sure that a Jewish person is involved in the cooking. Let's say you have fruit which is not fully ripened, and you eat them raw only in unusual circumstances, right? Normally you're not going to eat these raw. But again, if you were pressed to eat it, you'd eat it. Shehamanim metagnin oisam besukar. If you coat them in sugar by the chef, asuri mishum bishul avedkavim, he's going to forbid them because of bishul akum. Sheker shel tvua b'shel dvash. Okay, now this one is very, very, as we say, halacha l'maisa. You have beer or made from grain, which is most beer, or honey beer, which is really mead. We permit these to drink them, even when sold in the house of a non-Jew, i.e., in a non-Jewish brew pub. There's no issue of bishul akum. There's no issue of food which is cooked by a non-Jew. Because the grain is batal, it is neutralized, right? Its importance is subsumed by the water because you have to use a lot of water and just some grain. So you have to make sure that it's not fortified or there's no kind of wine addition to it, right? Because we see wine has a totally different din, totally different rule on wine. In a place where Jews are careless and lax in regard to drinking non-Jewish wine, yesh le bal nefesh lahachmir al atzmo gam b'shecher. He says a person should be strict with the beer. Ubinyan shtias kafe. What about coffee? Beli chalav, without milk. Dim chalav vada aser, because if it was milk, it'd be sure forbidden. We get the laws of. We'll explain. They came chocolate. That would be hot chocolate. Vete, tea. Etzel with a non-Jew. Shomer nafshe v'chek. That's moy. He's very stringent here. He says you shouldn't have it. The coffee or the tea or the cocoa. He says, V'yesh matirin, lishtos derech arai, aval derech kavius asur. So he says there are other authorities who say it's permitted. Some say to make it regular practice is forbidden. What are we talking about here? So the laws of non-Jewish wine are very different than the laws of non-Jewish food. And so they're dealt with separately. And today the custom is that all the beer that is in the stores, it's not an issue because you just go buy it from the store. The next question is there an issue with going into a pub and having a beer. So there doesn't seem to be an issue. However, to make it a regular practice could be an issue. In other words, to have the place where you go every night to have a beer, some kind of bar where you show up all the time, that could be an issue because of our concern that of establishing close relations over alcohol. However, if it's from time to time, it doesn't seem to be an issue. Tea, coffee, hot chocolate. So again, we're talking in those days about, let's say, a coffee house. Today, however, many people use coffee houses as places to work. So, let's say a Starbucks or any cafe, and they sit there with their laptop and they have their coffee. That because the places are used differently, we're going to have a little bit of a different approach to them. And of course, if anybody has a specific question or not, a specific question on a specific case should ask. But we're going to say that in regards to drinking coffee, first question is it kosher? The answer is, if it's just coffee, yes. The milk, well, if you're strict on Chalav Yisrael, you shouldn't have it without milk. And hot cocoa, again, the ingredients are just going to be cocoa and sugar. Normally that's going to be fine. And the tea is going to be fine. But a person who is strict might want to investigate to make sure. And then about the case of fraternizing these locations on a regular basis, not fraternizing, frequenting these places on a regular basis. So we want to make sure that if you're doing work there, that's one thing. But if you're going there for social reasons, we're concerned, and the Shulchan Aruch would say, maybe you should think twice. Okay, we have just finished number 12. We'll, please God, continue in our next